I'm Tammy Kolda, an applied mathematician, and this is Unlocking LaTeX Graphics. On this YouTube channel, I am providing a detailed how-to guide on using TikZ and PGF plots. I'm a longtime user of these tools, so I understand your frustrations. We're working our way through the contents of my book, Unlocking LaTeX Graphics, as well as bonus materials. Please subscribe, post questions, and share with your friends and colleagues. Today's episode will show you how to quickly draw a graph in TikZ using nodes and edges. This video is self-contained, but assumes a bit of familiarity with TikZ. You can always go back and watch my earlier videos linked in the show notes. As usual, we'll be creating our document today at Overleaf.com. We click New Project, Blank Project. We'll go ahead and put in the project name, Easy Drawing of Graphs in TikZ. Get that set up. Now I'll go ahead and organize a bit. I'll close this left-hand panel and increase the size of the right to 150% so that we can see things. And then I'll go ahead and set up my packages. Today I'm using TikZ, of course, as we always use. And then notice here I'm using the TikZ library positioning, which we're going to use for the placement of nodes as we get into our discussion. I'm also using full page and parskip just to make things look nice, and hyperref is so that I can link the author name back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be creating graphs in TikZ. So the first thing we'll do is create a node in our graph. Let me give you a little segment of code for us to get started. So here we're creating a node. We start with a TikZ picture, which is our canvas that we create everything in. And then to create a node, I put /node, the optional name of the node in parentheses. Here I've named the node A1. Then the contents of the node inside curly braces. The curly braces are required, but there can be nothing inside them if you want an empty node. And then every line is followed by a semicolon. And so over here on the right, we see our example node. To see the outline of the node, we have to specify the option draw on the node. So here I have that here. When I do that, I get a box around the node. I could also change the color. For example, if I type red here, I'll get everything being red, both the outline and the text. Now I want to set up a few things today that will work for every graph that we use. So I'll do that using TikZ set. So one thing I can do is set the node font to be large, boldface for both the regular text and the math, and then the sans serif family for the regular text. If you want to understand more about this option, go back and watch Getting Started with TikZ Nodes, linked in the show notes. When I compile this option, now I can see that my font has gotten larger and bold-faced. Now there's also a special style called every node, and I'm going to modify that by doing the /.append style, and I'm going to set the minimum size to 8 millimeters. And so when I do that, you see now this node has become a little bit larger. If you want to learn more about node sizing, watch node sizing in TikZ, linked in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about styles, watch using styles in TikZ LaTeX Graphics, also linked. Now that we know how to create a single node, let's go ahead and add some more nodes. Let me add some code here, and it'll just be a repeat of what we had before so that we can then go ahead and add to it. So the first thing I'll do is add a second node called A2. And the way that we're going to position it is, rather than specifying an exact position, we're going to make it relative to the node A1. And so we're going to do that with the below equals of A1 option to the node. This requires the TikZ positioning library. And so that's what we specified up here. So don't forget to use that or you'll get an error. The formatting of this is a little bit funny because it's below equals of, and then the name of the node that it's in reference to, and there's no parentheses around that. And this is very unusual in TikZ to use a name of a node without parentheses, but that's how it's done in this option. So now we have our node A2 down below A1. Now, suppose we want this to be the same style as A1. I could just copy red and draw into this options as well. But instead, I'm going to use TikZ set to create a style named A. So the way that I create this is A/.style. I'll put the red and draw in there. And now we can use the option A in each of these nodes, as I show here. And now both of them have the same style. Now let's go ahead and create another custom style called B. And this one will be blue, and we'll draw the outline. Now I'll go ahead and add 3 more nodes to my picture. I'll add another node A2 below of A3, and then I'll add a node B1 to the right of A1, and a node B2 below of B1. There are 8 positioning options: above, below, left, right, above left, above right, below left, and below right. So for example, we can change the position of B1 to be below right of A1. And so this will put it below the right corner of A1. What are the distances that are used? The default distance is 10 millimeters in the Y direction and 10 millimeters in the X direction. So this measures to and from the sort of appropriate points, depending on the thing that you're doing, on the outside of the node. So for example, A2 is below A1, and so we are going 10 millimeters from the bottom of A1 to the top of A2. I want to stress that these distances are not between the centers, they're between the appropriate edges. So B1 is below right of A1. This means that the upper left corner of B1 is 10 millimeters below and to the right of the lower right corner of A1. So this is how this positioning works. Now we may want to fine-tune some of the positions. So let's work with that same diagram again. We recompile that and we'll scroll down to this duplicate copy for starting off. Now I may want B1, for example, to be just a little bit higher. So let's see what we can do with this. Let's try specifying a distance of 10 millimeters in between the equals sign and of. So what this means is that now I've gone a distance of 10 millimeters from the lower right corner of A1, going at an angle of 45 degrees to the upper left corner of B1. Now we're constrained with a single distance to this angle of 45 degrees. We can instead specify a different X and Y distance to have more flexibility. So I'm going to change this to 1 millimeter and 15 millimeter of A1. The first distance is the up and down distance. So here I'm saying we'll go below 1 millimeter and then right 15 millimeters. That looks much nicer now. Now we know how to put down nodes. The next step is adding some edges. Let's start with the same picture we had before. And we go ahead and compile that. We'll go to the next page. To add an edge from A1 to B1, the format is as follows. We go ahead and start with this command /path. Then we have the name of the starting node. Then we have the word edge, and then the name of the second node. And the node names are contained in parentheses, and we always finish every statement in TikZ with a semicolon. So if I compile that, we see now that we have our edge from A1 to B1. We can add options to the edge. So for example, draw is already in there by default, but we could make this an arrow by adding our little arrow symbol. If you want to know more about arrows, go back and watch using arrows in TikZ LaTeX Graphics, linked in the show notes. So now we have an edge with an arrow at the end. We can also add an edge immediately after we create a node. So here I'll go and add an edge right after I create the node B2. I'll paste an edge that links to A2. So here it goes from B2 to A2. Now I put the arrow as reversed. So now I get looks like I've drawn an edge from A2 to B2. It's a little tricky there. And we can actually have more than one edge involving the same node. So I can follow this edge to A2 immediately with another edge to A3. Again, I've reversed the arrow here. Finally, there's a special style called every edge, which is similar to every node. And we can use it to apply a default style to all the edges. Here, I'm just going to do it at the TikZ picture level, and I'll make every edge, I'll pen the style to be thick. If I didn't use append, the draw, which is the default, would be erased. So we definitely just want to append the style. In general, with styles, unless you really know what you're doing, always do .append style. It never hurts to do it that way, unless you're trying to overwrite the old style. So now all the edges come out thick. Now let's talk about making your edges a little fancy using bendy edges and self loops. Let me paste a little segment of code here and scroll down, compile that, and we'll see we get 3 nodes, A, B, and C. I use the style of every node to draw the outline in gray, and then the command text equal specifies the color to be blue. I've also went ahead and specified every edge to be colored magenta and thick. Now suppose I want an edge from C to A. I can go ahead and add my edge command here. That'll draw an edge from C to A, but the problem is it goes straight through the node B. So if you don't want that, what can you do? So you can add this neat command called bend right, or of course you could also bend left. So if I add bend right to this, I get now an edge that curves. The default angle is 30 degrees, which is sufficient for our purposes, but if you want to change that angle, make it higher or lower, you can. So I make the angle to be 60 degrees, and now we get an even bendier edge between C and A. Now what about a self loop from a node back to itself? We can use the loop option to the edge, specifying above, below, right, or left. So here I'll take a self edge from B, and we say edge, loop below, and we get the little self edge that you see over here. I want to stress that you need an empty parens following that. Because it's an edge, it needs to have a target, even if that target is itself, it's a little bit odd. Now, a couple of small details to observe here. The self loop automatically has an arrow. I did not specify arrow here. The loop below option added the arrow. It actually also added a tiny bit of white space between the end of the arrow and the edge of the box. You can see there's no space here, but we can go ahead and add that space to our other arrow. And what they've done inside of there is they put shortened space greater than sign and then equal 1 pt. So it's adding a 1 pt distance, 1 point. And now when I add that here, you see that this has backed off just a little bit. We talked about shorten in the arrows video that's linked in the show notes. Let's finish off by talking a little bit about that automatic spacing that kicks in and how you can change that. I'll draw a picture here. This is a picture with the nodes 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I went ahead and created some styles that you might be interested in. The source style is defined to be fill with orange at 75%. That's what that exclamation 75 means. The sync style fills with cyan at 50%. The other 50% is white, by the way. I set every edge to be an arrow, to be ultra thick, to be shorter on both ends by 1 pt. And then I set every node here to be a circle style. So we haven't seen that in this episode before, but we've talked about it in a previous video. So now I draw all my nodes and I create all my edges between those nodes. The relative distances are controlled by an option called node distance, which defaults to 10 millimeters and 10 millimeters. So let me add that here. If I set it to 10 millimeters and 10 millimeters and recompile, nothing happens because that's the default. I can shorten the Y distance, which is first, to be 5 millimeters. So let me change that, and here's the effect. Now I've made everything a little bit closer together in the Y direction. I can also increase the X distance to be 15 millimeters, and here's the effect of that. I could also just make it a single value as discussed above, but I'm not going to do that today. This changes the default distances. I can still go ahead and change individual distances. For example, I could put a distance of 25 millimeters here for the fourth node, and that'll be further out to the right than the default distance. I hope you enjoyed today's video. You should now be able to create graphs in TikZ, hopefully without even watching any of the other videos. So those are there for extra information if you want it. Let me know if I missed anything that you needed. This is the 6th video in a sequence of videos about nodes, so be on the lookout for the next in the sequence. There's a link to the Overleaf document that we created today in the show notes. Please click like or subscribe if you want more videos like this, and you can also buy my book, Unlocking LaTeX Graphics, at your favorite book retailer. Thanks for watching.